Hey guys, and welcome back to Let's Chat Cyber session, looking at common cyber myths with me, Julia Lee, Senior Manager of the Education Center of Excellence Unit within the Cybersecurity Division of the Ontario Public Sector. We support the broader public sector within our province by ensuring that we have access to best practices, recommendations, advice, and guidance, and promoting, of course, the sharing and discussion of cyber-related information. So welcome back, guys, for a very interesting topic today on how we address common cybersecurity myths. With me today, I have Vern Crowley, who is a detective sergeant with the Ontario Provincial Police, working in the area of cyber crime. Also, we have with us is Delilah, VP of Business Planning and Partnerships from ORION. ORION is a not-for-profit organization supporting Ontario's progress with essential digital infrastructure. And of course, last but not least, we also have Marc Coyle, who's Manager of Information Systems in the City of Belleville, and also a member of our Cybersecurity Expert Panel. Welcome, guys. How are you guys doing?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Well, as we know, with every topic, there's always misconceptions and myths that arise, and especially in cybersecurity, there are a few that many people commonly fall into the trap of, such as we're unlikely to experience cyber attacks, or that we do not need to follow cybersecurity protocols since we have never experienced an attack. And most people have this conception. I'm not too sure why, in terms of they see it in the news all the time that there's a cyber attack that's happening, but it can't possibly be me, right? We can't possibly be the target. With that being said, Vern, can you address some common, maybe some common cybersecurity myths you've heard and what the truth behind it is?
Yeah, so I think directly to your point in relation to why people don't maybe think that it's going to be them, we're dealing with intangibles. If your house gets broken into and things are taken, you really feel that sense of violation. And I think people use their computers, their mobile, data isn't something you can pick up in your hand. So if they got in and they were to steal the data, the sense of loss doesn't really become apparent until they ascertain the value of that data. So for anybody that's out there, if you have those precious photos of your kids and they were stolen and gone, that would hit home because you really want those photos back. And of course, when we talk about the value of information, be it your personal identifiable information, such as health records or your financial records, any information on your loved ones or those who are connected to you. And if that got out to the public, or even worse, into the hands of a criminal, that they could use that information against you, then that starts to really hit home. But I think, podcasts like this, where we sort of bring this to the awareness to everybody, is great. And then on the law enforcement side, coming from the police side, there's a whole bunch of things in reporting to police that as soon as police are notified, that we're going to report to the media, or really, what can police even do? This is so prevalent. Can the police really do anything about it? And we can. We care. The fact that we're even here and that I am part of a cybercrime investigations team, I can tell you that law enforcement across Ontario, but truly across Canada, have really built up their capability and capacity to investigate these, and we need them reported, and we're here to help.
That's great. I think one cybersecurity myth that I often hear about is cyber threats are only external and our passwords are already strong. What else do we need to worry about? So maybe over to Delilah, if you can maybe shed some light on any myths out there that you want to debunk.
Sure, absolutely. One of the myths that you sort of touched on briefly is, the IT department is, they're responsible for cybersecurity, and as Vern even previously pointed out, is that technology is ubiquitous, so it impacts professionally in your personal life. So you as a personal contributor of this technology or owner of it, you do have a responsibility for it. So from a professional perspective, everyone in the organization plays a key role in protecting against cybersecurity and the events that take place. And good practice is one of the key things that you need to really enforce and to have a good cybersecurity hygiene. There's been something like an approximately 600% increase of phishing attacks since the onset of COVID-19. And, so investing in the culture of cybersecurity awareness for your own organization as well as personal is really critical in all of this. And, another, myth could be considered is that, as Vern also touched on, is that it's never going to be happening to our organization. And, that cyber criminals won't target our organization because of who we are. That too is definitely a definite myth. And that, global actors continue to increase, the frequency and the complexity of their attacks. And, according to the IBM 2020 study, that the average single malicious attack can cost upwards to $1 million per, and especially in the BPS organizations that we support today, this is something that's really critical, and it hits their budgets as well as their own personal lives. And there has to be a continuation of strengthening your cybersecurity, and you have to keep it top of mind in order to keep all of these costly and damage to your organization and to you personally. So those are just two of the myths that pop into my head.
Yeah, that's really interesting how severe just a simple myth can really do, and actors here can really take advantage of it. And later on, maybe Vern can share maybe some of your experiences and how this really kind of spiraled on the OPP side. I'm sure you probably have a few stories to share with our audience today. All right, so over maybe to Marc, maybe what your thoughts are on some common cybersecurity myths out there on your side.
Well, I think the most common one is that it's not going to happen to me, yet it's almost become part of our culture now that, there's a print somewhere that if you just send $1,000, they'll release the $1 million to you that you're entitled to. Like it's that common that you're being reached out to. And I've just had noticed lately that, I've been a very bad person because my phone regularly tells me Border Services is looking for me, or the federal government didn't have my taxes paid. And this time of year, I have so many parcels in transit that I just need to log on and share my credentials, and they'll tell me exactly how to pay that little bit extra to get it there, or whatever the case may be. I know we throw away 60,000 pieces of mail a day. Someone's trying really hard to reach out to every one of us. And if you're a weak link because there hasn't been some training offered or some enlightenment given, they'll get you. And I'm sure Vern is aware of thousands of people that are actually already on that side of the fence.
That's right. Anything to add there on your side there, Vern?
No, I'll concur. Both of what our guests said, Marc and Delilah there, that it's not a matter of if or it's really a matter of when. I know you've probably all heard about that, but I mean, if you have that mindset, it's really the proper one to have, and to do some of those best practices that you've probably heard over the course of the last 30 some days for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Strong password, don't reuse it across multiple sites, use two-factor authentication. And people are probably sick of hearing that, but the reason why the message is so strong for the month of October is to really reinforce it across, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when you do find that you are victimized, it is a really horrible, hollow feeling and a sense of helplessness. And then, of course, how pervasive it is across, like what's the level of jeopardy that you're dealing with? Because when you first get attacked, really that level is not known. And once it does become known, you really start to feel the anxiety, and really the cost, be it personal cost or be it financial cost, to get everything back and going again is very significant.
That's right. And it's quite astounding to see the amount of people and organizations with the cyber myth, which is my favorite one, that it can't possibly happen to us and it won't happen to us. And it's very unlikely that we'll experience a cyber attack anytime in the short term, right? Until it actually happens. All right. So, and I'm sure, Vern, I see you nodding your head. So in terms of, the stories that you hear from just all the myths that's traveled through to a cyber attack, what's happened because of it?
It's become more pervasive. So one of the challenges for law enforcement, at least for us, is the lack of reporting. And some of the common misconceptions of that are, well, the very first one, police neither have the capability or capacity to deal with it. That is changing. We in law enforcement have some very smart people and some pretty good capabilities. And I can honestly tell you, that in my 30+ years of policing, I've never seen such great collaboration as I have when it comes to the realm of cybercrime and cybersecurity. We here in the OPP learned very early on we weren't solving this on our own, and it's really the partnerships with not only the panel members, but your crew there at the ministry that makes the difference, and that cybersecurity positive reinforcement of the best practices so that we help target harden and take away the low-hanging fruit. Because the social engineering that Marc talked about, the tricking of the person into doing something they normally wouldn't do, has really gotten sophisticated. And it won't matter how savvy that you think you are. We all get very, very busy in our lives, and it's that simple click or that simple opening of attachment, which on your end nothing may even happen, but it literally opens up your system to further downware of malware, which can lead to a lot greater consequence for your data.
Yeah, for sure. I know, Marc, on your side, working at a municipality, was there ever a situation where you've seen a cyber attack happen where they weren't necessarily prepared to face?
Not directly a cyber attack, but I can tell you something much to Vern's comment. I can remember early on, it's probably 8 years now, that I was having a discussion with a security professional about how we had put in the appropriate firewalls and protocols and all of these things and how safe we were. And we were discussing it and saying, like, I think I've got it all packed. I've got it tight. And he says, hang on a second, I'm just going to send you a PDF and it'll list all the things you need to do. Right. So just a second, it arrived an email. He says, do you have it open? And he says, I said, yeah. And he says, and that's a nice blue shirt you have on. I said, how did you know that? And he says, because that PDF created a tunnel out of your system into mine. So you've protected everything. You've stopped all the incoming traffic. I sent you something that reaches out. And so now we have to have a talk about the maturity. It's a real life situation, and it just shows you, you're right, that attachment that that came and you weren't aware of, but you clicked on it. Much like Facebook all the time. Hey, you're in this video, and you click on it, and then you have to apologize to all your friends. It is getting much more common, much easier, and we have to think in new ways, because if you're not expecting that communication, you probably don't need it, and we really have to change. And the other quick thing I'll say is, I think that we have to remove any shame there is of getting tricked. In our municipality, someone clicks on something and they get tricked. If they come to us and say, hey, I clicked on this, it's this bad, we immediately check who reached out to that site. And now we know, hey, we have 4 people that reached out, and we can now go and try to mitigate those 4. Where if it's kept quiet and no one ever says anything, now we've got 4 potential access points that are really trouble. And that has nothing to do other than people being honest and saying, you know what, they got me. Give me a hand. And I think we have to work on the people part, because the bad guys, they're working on the people part. And I think we have to find like a get out of jail free card to let everybody know it's okay to get tricked if you let everybody know, and we can fix it. Otherwise, it's really trouble.
That's right. And what I'm hearing from this conversation, and I think we can't emphasize this enough in each of our roles here, is all organizations and people need to be ready for a cyber attack. And I know that even with resources from ORION, we try our best efforts to provide support to the broader public sector through tips and advice through organizations. But is there anything in particular there, Delilah, that you want to share with our audience today around how they can prevent themselves from a cyber attack?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Julia. And it's those things that we need to be prepared for. So, one of the key things is that as an organization is that you need to conduct regular risk assessments within your own infrastructure and within your own organization. And you need to be able to respond to that as well. So, implementing some exercises that simulate a response as well as simulate, an attack with your organization is something that is critical. So you can learn from it as well as address some of the gaps that have been identified. And again, we've all talked about it. It's all about that education and awareness and making sure that that communication is outward to your organization, and that it is okay, that you did click on this in error, but it also is something that is also going to keep your cyber hygiene top of mind for everybody, and the organization can use that as a regular tool. And education, awareness, and communication is so key to all of this.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for those useful tips there. And today we've discussed so far, there's many cybersecurity myths out there, but we can't really zero in on cybersecurity myths without education and the importance of emphasizing education and awareness through all organizations on that side. And there's never been, I don't think, a greater need, especially in the rise of attacks that we've seen globally. Maybe Vern, if you can share maybe some education and awareness programs that maybe the OPP is rolling out to help not just only debunk these myths, but just to prevent ourselves and protect ourselves in general.
Yes, actually, to our own members, our own internal members, you know, some of the things that we tell them, we have within the OPP, as a lot of other organizations do, pretty good security implementations put in place to help prevent. But at the end of the day, we're sort of the last line of defense, each and every one of us. So in our work environment, one of the things that we try to tell our people when they're at work, if they notice something suspicious, know what the protocols are in place from your IT department, because your IT department is there to help you. And if there was something suspicious, something that you just weren't sure about, you'd clicked on something, nothing happened, and it just sort of was causing you a second thought, know who to call, like know the number to pick up, to call the IT department, tell them what happened. They're going to be more than happy to help you sort of isolate it and at least put your mind to rest. And they're going to thank you because you've done your job to say, hey, we got a great employee here that's looking after our systems, our data, and all the rest of it. So it's that working together. And then at home, on the personal side, some of the things that we're doing, we all use technology, but how well do we really know on what the technology is doing in the background? So for instance, for anybody that uses Facebook, when was the last time you looked at your security settings as to what information is being shared? We don't. We're users of the technology, but the implications of the data that's being shared outside with other applications and things that are happening. You know, some of the things that I tell people, hopefully we'll get to travel soon. You know, we always want to be connected. And if I use Facebook as an example, it doesn't matter. Once we're into our phone, we're into Facebook. We don't have to enter a password because that security token is sitting in the phone, right? We had already entered in our user credentials and the authorization. So that security token is there. You don't have to enter your password. Of course, that's always communicating. Every time you're on you're traveling in Wi-Fi and public Wi-Fi, if you end up connecting, those connections are happening all the time. And we forget, you might think that, okay, we need to place this into airplane mode, but there's a lot of applications that are beaconing the entire time, and just getting to understand our technology, how it works, what information is being shared, that's a huge help. And you'd be surprised once you start looking at those terms of service, if you want to go through the multiple pages that are there on really what you allow information to be shared. It's quite incredible.
I almost wish we kind of had a poll here for our audience today just to kind of answer your question, Vern, on how often do we really check our settings? I know for myself, and I'll shamelessly haven't really checked my settings that often, right? I see some head nods and shakes here. So maybe some of you guys will agree with me, especially on the call today. But maybe over to open it up to Marc and Delilah in terms of maybe what you're seeing on your side.
With respect to security on these personal devices, I mean, we're seeing a huge uptake in two-factor authentication, and we're seeing a change of culture. It used to be like we enforced a long time ago 16-character passwords plus, because I mean, geeks know how hard it is to brute force crack one of those. So, you know, we would make those changes, and it used to be huge pushback. Oh my goodness, we're not doing that. We're not making that. And now we've asked for two-factor authentication. Oh my goodness, what do we have to do? Pass a test just to get on the computer. But the culture is changing, most often because on the news, they're talking about major organizations that are now being attacked. And so it is getting the attention. So, and I think that what should dispel any myth you have that every day, just recently, I mean, healthcare services in New Brunswick affected severely. That's how serious this is. So, and I can tell you, unfortunately, lots of local businesses, they'll reach out to me and say, hey, I've got this screen that says phone this number, or I can't access the computer. And that's a big problem, because the first thing is you got to phone the authorities and get this looked after. So yeah, it's happening. It's happening all around us, and it's up to us to embrace these changes and not necessarily push back, but pull towards a higher security posture.
And if I can just add to that regarding culture, it's culture is at every level. It's not only on the front line, it's all the way up to the executive, to the CEO. And there has to be an understanding and a commitment and an acceptance that, we need to be aware of all of these threats that are happening and put in and utilize the tools that we've been given. And to your point, as everybody's stressed earlier, is that it's not a bad thing that if you get caught doing something, but you reported it, but you need to be aware and understand what that means. And, a lot of the executives at certain, organizations and levels and that, they always think that they're protected from this, and they're not. And it's something that everybody throughout the entire organization needs to embrace and support.
That's right. So in terms of just rolling out the education program, have we seen a change in terms of how we roll out these programs at each of the organizations? And how has this, what are the most important parts of your programs that we are focusing on? Maybe we'll start with you, Delilah, as you roll this out for the higher ed audience here.
Yeah, so ORION, we took the approach of utilizing the tools that were given to the institutions as well as to ORION. And everybody fulfills and completes a self-assessment on their network, on their cybersecurity hygiene. And we use that as a tool to determine what was the need out there that was required to support the institutions. And one of the key things that showed up in the outcomes is that cybersecurity awareness was one of the key things that they needed to focus on, especially now what's happened with COVID and now what's happened with remote learning and remote working, is that there's something that needed to be really a focus platform developed in order to support this. So what we did is we committed to develop and work in parallel and jointly with the community. And what we created was ORION Cybersecurity Awareness Program. And what we've done is we've partnered with CIRA, which is the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. And that's where we launched our ORION Cybersecurity Awareness Program. And it's a one-year pilot that we work with the institutions, and it's to address their training and cybersecurity awareness through and phishing programs. And it's a customized platform that we partnered with Bosteron as well. And it really has highlighted the importance of the organization stepping up and actually supporting this with their users. And the acceptance of it is growing. The platform does provide you a lot of data in order for you to really focus on areas of improvement. But it also, the cybersecurity awareness program is also aligned to ORION's objective of being that cybersecurity advisor and leader within our community. So it's something that we're really proud of, and it's something that we've utilized ourselves in our own organization. And it's become something that's of an everyday practice now. It's the norm for ORION, and it's becoming the norm for the institutions as well.
That's great. Anything on your side there, Marc, in terms of how you guys roll out your education program, and what are the things that you are kind of emphasizing on in particular in today's world?
We use the exact same product. We use the Bosteron tool through CIRA, and it's quite interesting. When there's a new topic that comes out, it's automatically pushed out to all staff, and we keep track of who's done it. It is reviewed because you have to maintain a score in order to retain your privilege of internet access. We do semi-regularly phish our own staff, and when they click on something inadvertently, they are thrilled to learn that they've been assigned a new educational module to review. It doesn't bring out the best in people, but it sure does well for our security posture. So we use the exact same tool. It's quite successful in ours, and we're using a lot of the CIRA tools, to be honest, for DNS, et cetera, to anything to make our system just that much tougher for somebody to exploit. So it's encouraging to hear that there are other larger organizations doing the exact same thing.
That's great. So on that note, I think I've got a few more myths for us today. In terms of one of the myths is doing penetration tests, they're simply enough. in a few moments around, if we have a third-party vendor that's going to come on and provide support, that's enough, or compliance really equals to a robust cybersecurity strategy for organization, and that's all we need. So we'll open up the conversation here on what your thoughts are on these myths and if you've kind of encountered these things here. So maybe we'll start with you, Vern.
Okay, so unfortunately, I've had the experience of meeting with lots and lots of victims, and small, medium, and large organizations. When I say large, I mean literally multinational corporations that have their headquarters here within the province of Ontario. Even at a very mature security posture, companies are getting attacked and compromised. There's a lot of different scenarios that have happened. You may have a server that's sort of working in the background and wasn't necessarily part of that upgrade in your security that you were doing, because if it's not broke, it doesn't need to be fixed. It works on a legacy system. It's off to the side, and then, oh my gosh, it got forgotten about, which ends up being the vector into the new system. We've seen that. We've seen the IT security gone to a cloud monitoring for the real-time intrusion detection and prevention, which is a very good opportunity for smaller businesses if they can't, purchase some of these, because it can be very expensive. So cloud service providers do offer sort of a good alternative, but they are not the end-all be-all. We have seen where real-time detection does not detect in some of the attacks and the vulnerabilities that get exploited. As we see, these new vulnerabilities come up all the time, and really it becomes part of the culture, which was mentioned before, for everybody, but including the IT department, to ensure that when these latest vulnerabilities, for instance, like Office 365, it was a huge vulnerability for everybody, and most people took steps very quickly to do it. But of course, some people, they weren't aware of it until a couple weeks later, and then within that window, they got compromised. So the patch management systems, and we rely a lot on automation now. So for the people that are listening, you're not alone. This education and awareness helps, but there are layers that are put in front of you that will help you. So again, it's this holistic view, really. And actually what was mentioned before, the culture, where not only at the lower level, all of us, but even I see the changes, the positive changes, that the corporate structure now takes cybersecurity more serious. They literally put it into their budget discussions. So we see the tide changing, and I think those positive steps will continue. But in the meantime, there's still a lot to do for everybody.
Certainly, Vern, and thanks for sharing that. That's definitely very, very helpful. Delilah and Marc, any remarks on that side of these myths?
Vern, absolutely. It's something that is tied into everything. Vulnerability is, you can never do enough to protect your network, and people need to understand that a lot of organizations think, oh, they just need to implement the technology. Technology is 10% of cybersecurity, 90% is the people in the process. And if you do not focus on that as a holistic view, you will find those vulnerabilities that will appear, and you'll be sitting there going, okay, we've addressed this, but we forgot about this. So it's something that we can't stress more, so that it's not only technology, it's people and process and technology that really will hold together your network in a secure way. So I'd like to stress that it's an all around package.
Yeah, I think my experience, the pen tests are absolutely necessary. They'd fall into like a checkbox on your due diligence. Did you hire somebody? Did you do a pen test? All of that stuff. But if you haven't educated your staff that hooking in a wireless modem into one of your ports that happens to be active now open the floodgates to your network. And very simple things that we did, that people don't think about or take for granted. Modern cell phones connected to an internal Wi-Fi and then turn on your hotspot to shares the internal Wi-Fi through your phone. And now you have a direct port into your network. So you think it's fun, I'll just share I'll turn on the hotspot on my phone so I can do X, Y, and Z. If it happens to be connected to your internal network, it just shared it. And anyone who has access to the Wi-Fi on your phone can now get at your network directly. That's a reasonably new development in technology that a lot of people don't take for granted. But a pen test is nothing compared to the fact that you just shared, as far as that signal goes, a direct connection to your network. So diligence of going through every little thing, this is something we have to do, is go through all of these new technologies and see whether or not it did put us at risk. And that's something that I think until recently wouldn't even have been on the radar. So it's these are the things I think you have to stay on top.
Yeah, go ahead, Vern.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to, we talk about, or you asked the question about the pen tests, are they enough? And we talked about all the holistic things that need to be done. One of the things, I think we're going to get there. It's almost like the green energy, the transformation. You probably heard about security by design. We need technology to help us out. But rather than layer it on top of each other where there's holes where the water can filter through down to the bottom, the design of new technology coming out. And I think you're going to see this, especially since the latest attacks on the critical infrastructure, right? Those linchpins like the Colonial Pipeline or the JBS meatpacking, which had literal implication on the supply chains throughout the economy, causing price fluctuations for which every person then gets affected by. I think from those attacks, I think where everybody is going is that they realize that the implementation is one thing, but the actual design of any new products that we're going to use, that the security is going to be built in, and that will help all of us as end users, no matter how diligent we think that we can be, all the education that we take. It's going to be that interlinking of the security by design, the new technologies that are coming out with the security focus in mind. And as we start to build our networks properly, it won't be a layered effect as much as it will be a concrete block effect where each implementation is secure in its own. I see it coming. This is just my point of view, but I see things shifting, especially in the last year, because of the nature of the attacks and the effects that it has holistically on our entire economy.
So if I can just add to that, Julia, is, the accountability of product development resides under me. And what we've done now is security used to be outside of that development. It has now become a standard line item within the development. And to ensure that it is addressed from a technology, people, and process perspective, but it's now the norm. It is no longer special. And it was a fundamental change for a lot of people within the organization, because it's not how you do that, right? It's something layered on top. No, it's now intertwined. It's a fabric now of any type of product that gets developed out of ORION. So it's something that is really being embraced now. That's always top of mind. What about security? What do we need to address there? So something to be aware of.
Yeah, what we're hearing here is there's a great emphasis equally, technology, people, process. It's all of it. It's all intertwined, and it's just making sure that in between there, how do we dispel those myths for folks to make sure that things are top of mind for them. But maybe moving on to our discussion around expert panel. Marc, you're sitting on our expert panel appointed by the Minister of Government and Consumer Services to provide recommendations on how we improve our digital infrastructure across the province. But one of the recommendations there that I noted was that you are trying to implement to make sure that BPS entities have a secure and strong education and awareness program. Going forward, Marc, can you maybe share some of your top tips on how we go about that?
Well, at the present time, we're compiling what's available. I mean, Ryerson has a wonderful program, and they're making it available to the broader public sector as it matures. But really, that's what we're trying to do is identify a standard that we can adhere to, and then hopefully apply or consider application. One of the biggest challenges we face, I think, in the broader public sector is there isn't a playbook for us to say, you must have this security. Unlike a business where a bank can say, you know what, everything is two-factor security, and that's all there is to it. Otherwise, it will turn it off. The broader public sector doesn't have that, and it's so large and it's so diverse. It just makes it very complicated. What is the standard? Yet there are other organizations pushing a standard. I'm sure anyone here who's recently filled out an application for cybersecurity insurance knows that there's a new standard that they want to be aware of. Payment card industry has always had a very high standard that they have put on us. So I think we're just looking for a way to level the playing field, because we're easy targets without saying that you must meet at least this bare minimum. And in order to say that, we have to provide the tools for the broader public sector to reach out and take advantage of. So our job is to identify the tools, the standards, and make them available as best we can for any recommendations.
Great. All right, Delilah and Vern, did you have anything else to maybe add for our audience today before we move on to our Q&A portion?
Just one comment to that, Marc, is the tools, absolutely, the playbook, absolutely, but also associated with that is the budget and the funding for it as well.
Mhm.
You know, the organizations are going through tremendous change, you know, over the last 18 months and going forward, and it's something that is top of mind. And, you know, they are trying to fit it into their budgets, but it's very, very challenging. You're not only dealing with, you know, the budgets for the technology aspect, but also for the skill sets as well, because the skill set, there's such a churn happening in this field right now, is that it is budget driven, a lot of it. So just wanted to make sure that it's clear that it's a combination of everything, budgets and funding and work and playbook and standards. So they all get intertwined together.
I agree. I just assume there will be budgeting, but it hasn't been my exposure. I'm in the municipal space. I know others haven't been funded. I do know that if we don't pay to have it done right, we will pay to have it done over.
Yes.
That's how we've existed in forever. And this is no different. We will pay and have it done right. Or we'll start all over.
Exactly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Vern, any last minute takeaways there?
No, I think from just talking to people, and it could be in organizations or even our organization, you know, when it comes to e-learn and even doing webinars, they're just bombarded. It takes up a lot of their time. Where I see success are small things where you have people do something hands-on. So like if you're doing a 20-minute webinar, have them literally, if they're on a Windows machine or a Mac machine, have them go to their security settings so that they are actually looking and have a feel for what the security means and where they would find that and where they could find out more information, or pick up their mobile device and do that. You know, if they're going to implement some DNS and they're not even sure what that is, Sierra was mentioned, you know, they have the Canadian Shield, you know, walk them through, here you go right here, and this is what it'll do for you. And that, when we start to have them do, I think it latches on a little better. So as we talk about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, maybe going forward and next year as we develop do's, so things that we do, I hear a greater uptick than being bombarded telling us everything. Just from my point of view, just over the last few weeks.
That is a great tip, and especially in today's world, we're seeing a greater increase of just kind of webinars, virtual events for folks to come together and continue to push out the awareness messaging on that front. But I haven't seen yet, in terms of my experience, and folks, if you do, then maybe raise your hand or comment in the comment section if you've seen what Vern suggested in terms of actually people taking you through your security settings virtually, or, you know, during the presentation. So that's definitely a very good tip for organizations, or for us to kind of keep in mind while we're organizing these events. All right, so I guess it's now time we turn into our Q&A portion. I want to thank Delilah, Vern, and Marc very much for your insights today on addressing some of our common cybersecurity myths. I know that the list can go on and on, but maybe we'll pass it over to our audience now to share with us maybe some of their myths and some of the questions they have for our members here today. Providers are no longer covering the cost of ransoms, as well as the volume of attacks and the number of organizations affected have dramatically increased. And some ransomware has become a multi-billion-dollar industry and growing. Our first question from the audience today is, from today's cybersecurity landscape and trends with ransomware, what can small companies do to protect their infrastructure? Maybe I'll pass this over to Marc first to open up the first question here for our audience.
I think if I was a small company, I would certainly start with something like making sure we had the Canadian Shield, Sierra's firewall, or DNS rather, in place. That's going to do a lot of cleaning as far as where your staff can go. I take a look at the firewall, whatever you're using that's forward facing, and make sure that it has an email phishing app program on it that would get rid of the most common ones, and then engage in employee training. If it's a small organization, hopefully that can be done reasonably quickly, and that should get rid of the low-lying fruit. If your staff is aware and your network is protected and the most common attack vector, your email, is protected, those are the easy ones, I think. And then afterwards, you can start looking at whether you want to get involved in a SOC, a security operations center, where someone's actively monitoring and all of these things. They're just usually beyond the means. So I certainly recommend any small business to at least take care of those three things: baseline training, some kind of phishing program, and some kind of DNS so people can't go to random locations.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think treating ransomware maybe as a business risk, just changing our mindset, just regarding ransomware as a major business risk that can really disrupt our services. That way you're in the mindset and prepared to mitigate some of those risks by looking into your business continuity plans and focusing on prevention and recovery of your services. Vern, Delilah, is there anything you'd like to add on this question here and what small companies can do to protect their infrastructure? All right, so moving on to our next question. Curious to hear on what trends the panel sees going into the holidays. I think really ransomware hackers love regular weekends, but a long one, I think that's great for them when everyone's off cruising with family and friends and studiously avoiding anything remotely office related. I think that's the good stuff. Threat actors deploy their ransomware when there is less likelihood of people being around, and they do know that, to start pulling plugs. So we'll open it up to our panel members here today and maybe what trends you'll see during these holidays.
Well, I can tell you from the past, the trends that we've seen are a lot of the cyber-enabled crimes. So like your online frauds, especially when it comes to holiday shopping, be it ads for specials. The Canadian Shield that Marc talked about before is really good. So when we talk about DNS, the domain name system, the phone book of the internet, when it goes through an entity like Canadian Shield at Sierra, it weeds out, they filter out some of the bad ones that they've seen so that you know that you're going to good, legit websites and you don't get the DNS spoofing, which happens a lot over the holidays. You go to sites that look legit, they got a shopping cart and everything, and you think you're on the right site, but really you're not. And you've added in all your credentials and credit card information, and boof, it's gone. So that happens every year. So cyber, right? So we got the U.S. Thanksgiving coming up. So the Friday and then the Cyber Monday after the fact. So right, starting now, just be a little bit more vigilant.
And if I could just add to that, that vigilance isn't only from the attacker, but we have to be vigilant as well in order to ensure that our organization is ready. And one of the key things, again, as we've talked about for the last 40 minutes, is education and cybersecurity awareness training, just making sure that we amp that up as well, just as much as the attackers are amping up their opportunities to see what they can penetrate.
I'd just like to volunteer that all of you are going to get emails from Canada Post for stuff you didn't send. It's going to be from FedEx for stuff you didn't send. Someone's going to ask you to send photographs of a gift card with the back scratched off to them because they've forgotten the gift and they need to have you send that. And don't do any of that. Just don't do anything. If there's any package you have in transit, log into that system and then check it yourself. Don't follow any links, etc. But most often, Every attack I've seen, they try to get an emotional response from you. Oh, your package is delayed. It won't be there. You have to click, and it creates that response. Or, oh, your account was overcharged $500. Click here to refund. Oh my God, $500. So if there's an emotional response to an email you didn't get, that's suspicious. And if you can just remember that, you're going to be way better off.
That's right. I think we're going to see and anticipate a lot of phishing, smishing, and vishing, and all those sorts of attacks that we just discussed here. But the next question is targeted to Delilah on what your perspective is on security attacks, even in remote communities. And what is ORION doing in terms of the services they provide to rural and remote communities?
Great question. And, just to put in perspective that attacks aren't just specific to areas, it's across the board and it's across to all institutions. And so, if a vulnerability happens, it just doesn't affect one, it affects the entire sector. So what we've done is we've created a program, the OnCheck program with shared cybersecurity for that increased awareness and to provide equity across the board from smaller to large institutions that are on the ORION network. And what we're doing is, we're addressing the equity of cybersecurity capabilities, and we're enhancing the overall cybersecurity posture within the sector. So, it's such a dynamic nature out there. It's complex, and the volumes of cybersecurity threats are in higher education. They do require a collaborative approach, which is really essential in order for everybody to benefit from sharing information and protecting ourselves. So, individual institutions, they're struggling to meet some of their own internal cybersecurity staffing needs. So, our OnCheck program has brought together the community of key administrators and IT professionals from across Ontario in the higher education institution space. Therefore, we're combining all the capabilities and expertise of all of our members, which has now increased to 33 members of colleges and universities. So again, if the collaborative nature of cybersecurity is there, ORION is driving an opportunity here for the community to work collaboratively to protect everyone. But again, one vulnerability impacts everybody. It just doesn't impact that one institution.
Great, thanks very much, Delilah. Now we'll focus on cyber education and just spend a few minutes on that in terms of the importance of cybersecurity education, as we know, provides people with the knowledge and the skills they need to stay safe online, but it also involves acknowledging the benefits and opportunities offered by our online world and understanding the risks and avoiding some of the potential harms. Our question from our audience member today is on what techniques are being used to make cyber education more attractive, enticing people to want to learn. And I think this is another probably question over to Delilah on your education program over at ORION.
So, it's timely. We just had our OnCheck day, member day last week. Was half a day overview of the program and all the issues that are out there and future opportunities for us to only improve. And one of the key speakers that we had there was two individuals from Durham College that had created, Seneca, that had created a gaming cybersecurity education platform for the students. And this had really initially been something that was somewhat sat back, say, yeah, okay, well, that's not going to take on as much as what they had thought. But this gaming really enticed the staff and the students to participate, and it also put together teams and overall competition amongst each other. But at the end of it all, there was also rewards. So they were given reward points for the next phishing exercise. Therefore, they could contribute and use that for something within the college programs and that. So there's various things that can take place. But this one particular gaming experience was something that was very interesting, and we're going to expand it out to the rest of the community that's out there.
That's right, and I think that it's important just to look at not just the cyber trends that we see today, but also behavior insights. Maybe I'll pass it over to Vern first, then over to Marc in terms of what your thoughts are around how to increase cyber education, make it more enticing, or what are your thoughts on the future of cybersecurity training?
I honestly think a lot of us are worn out. It's the last 2 years, there's been a lot of training. We've been online. We've either been given e-learn modules at work that we have to do, or we're told that, we've all heard, don't click on the email. We got that messaging. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. The Nigerian prince scheme, you probably don't know a Nigerian prince. All that being said, I think moving it forward to entice people is break it down into the very basics where you can capture the person's interest. So for instance, what I mean by that, if you were to poll the crowd here now and ask a generic question for which you have a high probability response, as in how many people in the audience use a smartphone? So your high probability is going to be there. And then the next, how many have looked at the security settings on your phone? Then you're going to get a different response, and sort of walk them through, because it's of interest to them. They use the smartphone. They haven't really had the chance to dig down, and you prompting them to do something that they use every day, I think is going to entice them a little bit more. That learning curve and actually using the product, understanding the product, be it your computer, the program, or the cell phone, and driving down into that interest. That I think is, and the gaming is one of it, but that doesn't work for everybody. That might work for 40%, 50% of the population. The other half, they don't even care about gaming and they'll move on. So I think it's capturing the interest, and how we do that. That's really for all of us to come up with that game plan, but get them interested. And again, once we get everybody interested and doing the right thing security wise, we'll be in a lot better position.
Yeah, I think for us, it's unfortunately kind of negatively reinforced in that, again, from CIRA, there's a product called Bosron. It sends out training to all your staff. It encourages you to send the phishes to, to their phishing alert email. It also allows us to phish our own staff, which I'm sure is more entertaining for us than them. And if you happen to click on one of the phishes, then it sends you a new training module to do, which doesn't bring out the best version of those individuals. I can say though, if you can kind of try to make it a game for the people, at least in IT, in order to try to stop this thing. I mean, the game for us is to stop others from getting to our system. So something we do is we randomly post an employee on our website that doesn't exist. And so when email comes in and they figured out our naming convention and that employee is included in any way, we delete the whole mess because we know it wasn't asked for because that person doesn't exist. So that's part of the game for us to do things in our network just to kind of make it even tougher for people to do it. So it may not be a game for the employees, but for the IT folks, at least think of those. That's not written down anywhere. That's just something we do to annoy them as much as they're annoying us. So think of that. It's the game of, you're playing against them and you are playing against them every day. So you might as well try to make it fun. I always think it's fun when mail arrives for that person because I wonder who said that.
Yeah, the gamification part of education programs and training is definitely a trend that we're seeing kind of across the board. But on to our next question in terms of interest of time. Are most DDoS attacks driven by bots alone? Maybe I'll just open this question to anyone here who wants to add in.
On behalf of Orion's network, we feel that we do see them that they are mostly bot driven at this point in time. And the reason for that is it's the attacker can hide behind the bot, and so it just hides their identity. Plus, the attacker then they can command and control, the multiple resources that make the attack more powerful. So it's just an easy way for them not to be identified at this point in time. We monitor it on a 24/7. We do have data, which is great now for the past 12 months since we've implemented, DDoS and enhanced DDoS. And it really has helped us identify and understand what is happening out there on the networks. But today, yes, they are more bot driven than previously thought. But that's just the way they're doing it right now. They're going to get smarter. They're going to find a different way of doing it.
Yeah, behind all of these attacks as a person, they're pulling the trigger. They're using a botnet. But to do the distributed denial of service, they're compromised computers and they've taken a lot of time to set up their systems. But at the end of the day, it's a person or a group behind it that's pulling the trigger and are getting the responses back from all of their campaigns. So it's the people that are out there. And again, I've said it sort of before, in the same way that ransomware is making so much money, they continue to apply their criminal ways via the internet, and it's because they're making a lot of money. And so they're only going to continue to do so.
And I recommend that you invest in a firewall company. Don't invest in a piece of hardware. It's, you've got to have that subscription, has to be actively monitored. If it's important enough for you to protect it, protect it. So ours, anything that hits our firewall, it's being actively managed by a security company. So we have all of the main things turned off, but they will actually monitor it for us. And that's a huge plus. And it's just part of the cost of doing business now. To buy a hardware and wait for it to do updates and all that stuff may be fine for a small, very small operation. But if you have something core, hire a company and they'll have a piece of hardware that they manage on your behalf. And I think it's the safest way to fight back, because I don't have time to do all that all day long. I just hire it out.
Thanks, Marc. All right, our last and final question for today is related to nation state. Our thoughts on nation state driven attacks, and of course, strategic timing on part of hackers takes many forms, but I think the first and foremost rule is do not click on any suspicious links. We can't emphasize that enough. Maybe I'll open it up over to Vern, and then over to Delilah and then Marc on your thoughts on nation state driven attacks.
Well, nation state driven or nation state sanctioned are sort of two different things. So nation state, if they're behind it, they're more interested in the cyber defenses of not only the country's critical infrastructure, but on the secrets that maybe the companies may have. Remember, to get an economical advantage, knowing the trade secrets or knowing who's going to bid on what, or future stock manipulations, countries, if they have the inside track on that, that gives them a competitive advantage. So a lot of that would be the nation state. What's attacking sort of companies for the payment of money might be nation state sanctioned, whereby they're aware of it, but it may not be necessarily them, but it'd be a criminal organizational group that is targeting businesses for the ransomware and the payment of money. And that continues a lot. A lot of times we may call them by special names, APTs, advanced persistent threats, and all the rest of that. But again, don't think it's just sort of countries outside of North America. It works in reverse. I can tell you North American countries do the exact same thing. So it's global and it goes back and forth.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I'm just hoping at some point that they stop paying the ransoms. And I know that that's a ton of money, but if they put that money that they were going to give away in ransom into building more robust systems, a lot of this problem goes away. It's only a big problem now because you can make money at it. You can be successful and have anonymous funds transferred to you. And so it's going to be very, very painful for a company, and they're going to want to buy their way out. I respect that. But at some point, we just have to say we can't pay and if the insurance companies stop, then we'll stop. I know we're not going to suddenly say to the taxpayers, hey, everybody chip in $300, we have to pay a ransom. It's not going to happen. So, I'm just hoping that that's how that advances, and it puts a lot of this to rest. When there's no money to be made, people will stop.
And just to add on to what Vern and Marc had added on there, and everybody will be impacted by nation state attacks, and especially on the education and research side that we support today. It's something that Vern had identified as sanctions. Things like this need to be brought together, identified, communicated, and work collaboratively to see how it can be addressed and supported from a how do we resolve these types of issues. Again, I'll go back to the same. It's about education and communication and making sure people understand what is happening out there. And every part of the working sector is impacted by this, and it's coming from all angles and all states.
Excellent. I think this concludes it. I think that's all the questions that we have from our audience today. We're now at the end of our session. A special thank you to our guest today, Marc, joining us from the city of Belleville, joining in Delilah from ORION, and Vern, of course, from the OPP. We hope that you were able to get some greater insight as to why cybersecurity is more important than ever. And we really look forward to seeing you again in our next session. But in the meantime, stay safe during regular weekends, during regular days, and of course, in particular, through the holidays. Thanks, guys.